There's a kind of escape almost no one notices. It's not the obvious kind. It's not quitting a project. It's not giving up on a goal halfway through. That kind of escape is easy to recognize. People understand it. They even sympathize with it. There's another kind, quieter, more subtle, and far more dangerous. It's the escape from looking at yourself. Because contrary to what most people believe, the biggest obstacle to self-inquiry isn't lack of time, it isn't lack of discipline, and it's not even the endless distractions of the modern world. The real obstacle is fear, but not the fear of failure, not the fear of making mistakes. It's a much deeper fear, the fear of discovering something about yourself you may not want to see. Most people believe they want self-knowledge. They believe they're searching for truth, for clarity, for understanding. But in practice, something very different happens. The moment observation begins to deepen, the moment something honest starts to surface, something inside tightens. The mind shifts the subject. It rationalizes. It distracts itself. It moves away. And this movement isn't random. It's precise. It happens exactly at the point where self-inquiry stops being comfortable and starts becoming real. Because there is a fundamental difference between thinking about yourself and actually observing yourself. Thinking is safe. Thinking allows control. It allows interpretation. It allows you to maintain the image you've built of who you are. But observing without filters, without justification, without narrative, that's something entirely different. And that's where the real problem begins. Because the moment you truly observe yourself, without trying to fix, improve, or escape, you run into a risk. The risk of seeing something that doesn't fit the story you've been telling yourself. And the question almost no one asks, but that sits behind this entire escape, is simple. What if I'm not who I believe I am? This is exactly the point that Jiddu Krishnamurti spent his life trying to make people see. Krishnamurti insisted that self-inquiry is not analysis, not interpretation, and not a gradual process of becoming something better. It is the direct observation of what is, without distortion, without judgment, without escape. And that's where the difficulty begins. Because observing yourself without judgment sounds simple, but it is one of the hardest things a human being can do. The moment you begin to observe, you quickly realize that the mind does not stay still. It interferes. It labels, compares, justifies, condemns. It tries to reshape what is being seen into something more acceptable, more familiar, more comfortable. And if that doesn't work, it does something even more subtle. It withdraws. It moves away from the observation altogether. Before we go any further, let's pause for a second. You there on the other side of the screen? I see you. Write your name and your city in the comments below. Now be real with me. What are you struggling with today? Use this phrase. At this moment, I'm facing. You're not alone in this. Let it out. Krishnamurti pointed out that we are rarely in direct contact with ourselves. What we experience instead is a constant stream of interpretations about who we are. We don't see anger. We explain it. We don't see fear. We disguise it. We don't see contradiction. We smooth it over with ideas. So what we call knowing ourselves is often just knowing our own narrative. And the deeper the observation goes, the more unstable that narrative becomes. Which is why the mind resists, not because it is weak, but because it senses something disruptive, something that doesn't just challenge what you think, but what you are. At the center of this whole movement, there is a conflict most people never fully articulate. On one side, there is the person you believe yourself to be, the identity you've carefully constructed over time, your values, your personality, your story, your sense of being this kind of person and not that kind. It feels stable, familiar, necessary. And on the other side, there is what actually is, not the idea of yourself, Not the description, but the raw, unfiltered reality of your thoughts, your reactions, your contradictions, your fears, your impulses as they arise moment to moment. And these two are not the same. The problem is that we are deeply invested in the first one. This psychological identity isn't just a description. It's a form of security. It gives continuity. It gives meaning. It gives the feeling that there is someone solid at the center of experience. So, over time, we protect it. We defend it. We refine it. We identify with it so completely that questioning it feels like a threat. And this is where self-inquiry becomes dangerous. Because real observation does not confirm the image. It exposes the gap between the image and reality. You may believe you are honest, until you observe the subtle ways you distort truth. You may believe you are kind, until you see the hidden motives behind your actions. You may believe you are in control, until you watch how quickly emotion takes over. And each of these moments creates friction, because something in you wants to maintain the image, while something else begins to see through it. This is the tension. And most people resolve this tension not by going deeper, but by retreating. They adjust the narrative. They reinterpret what they saw. They soften the contradiction. Or they simply stop looking. Because to continue observing without interference means allowing the possibility that the you've been protecting may not be real in the way you thought. And that realization carries a psychological weight that is hard to sustain. Not because it is negative, but because it destabilizes everything that felt certain. So the mind does what it has learned to do best. It returns to the familiar, to the known, to the version of you that feels safe, even if it isn't true. And this is where we reach the most uncomfortable part of all. Because at some point, if you follow this movement honestly, a realization begins to take shape.
For most of your life, you believed you were your thoughts. You believed the mind had to be fixed, silenced, controlled. But no one ever told you this. The mind was never the problem. The real trap is believing you are it. There is something in you that watches fear, that watches pain, that watches every thought arise and disappear. That observer has never suffered. It was never born, and it will never die. When this is seen, effort disappears. The spiritual search ends, because the one who was searching was never real. This is not a teaching to believe in. It is a direct experience, simple and deeply liberating. The book, The Awakening of the Observer, does not teach techniques. It points to the exact place where the ego dissolves. Each page is a mirror, and what is seen there cannot be unseen. If something in you recognizes these words, the call has already begun. Click the link in the comments and get your copy of The Awakening of the Observer now.
Quiet at first, almost subtle, but impossible to ignore once it's seen clearly. You are not avoiding self-inquiry by accident. You are avoiding it because, at some level, you understand exactly what it might reveal. There is a hidden intelligence in this avoidance. It is not random. It is not simply laziness or distraction. It is protection. Because self-inquiry, when it is real, does not just adjust your behavior. It does not simply help you become a better version of yourself. It dismantles the very structure you've been calling yourself. And that has a cost. Because as long as you believe in a fixed identity, you also inherit a certain kind of comfort. Even if that identity is limited, even if it is contradictory, even if it creates suffering, it is still known. It is still predictable. It still gives you a sense of continuity. There is something strangely reassuring about knowing who you are, even if that knowledge is incomplete or distorted. So there is a silent advantage in not looking too deeply. If you don't investigate fully, you don't have to question the foundation. If you don't question the foundation, you don't have to face uncertainty. And if you don't face uncertainty, you can continue living inside a structure that feels stable. But the moment you begin to see without distortion, that structure starts to crack. And this is where fear intensifies. Because now it is no longer about discovering a flaw or correcting a behavior. It is about something far more radical. The possibility that the observer, the one you think is in control, is itself part of the illusion. This is something Jiddu Krishnamurti pointed to repeatedly. He questioned whether there is, in fact, a separate observer watching thoughts, or whether the observer is the thoughts. And if that is true, then the entire sense of a fixed me begins to lose its ground, not intellectually, but experientially. And that is deeply unsettling, because if there is no solid center, no permanent identity, no fixed self to hold on to, then what are you? What remains when the image dissolves? This is the edge that most people never cross, not because they cannot, but because everything in their conditioning pushes them away from it. Society reinforces identity. Relationships reinforce identity. Language itself reinforces identity. Everything around you constantly confirms that you are someone, with a name, a past, a personality, a defined psychological structure. So when self-inquiry begins to reveal that this structure may not be as solid as it appears, it creates a kind of internal shock. And the natural reaction to that shock is withdrawal. You go back to thinking instead of observing. You go back to describing instead of seeing. You go back to the known, because the known, even when it is limited, feels safer than the unknown. But here is the paradox. The very thing you are protecting may be the source of your limitation. The identity you are trying to preserve may be the boundary that prevents you from seeing clearly. And the fear you feel when that identity is questioned may not be a signal of danger. It may be a signal that something false is being exposed. But this is where honesty becomes rare, because it requires a different kind of courage. Not the courage to achieve, not the courage to succeed, but the courage to not know who you are. To remain with that uncertainty without immediately escaping. To observe without reaching for conclusion. To stay present as the familiar dissolves, without rushing to rebuild it. And this is precisely what most people avoid, not because they are incapable, but because they sense, deeply, that if they go all the way, there may be nothing left of the person they thought they were. So in the end, this doesn't come down to technique. It doesn't come down to discipline, or knowledge, or even time. It comes down to something much simpler and much more difficult. A choice. Imagine, for a moment, two versions of you. One continues exactly as it is now, thinking about itself, analyzing, interpreting, maintaining a coherent image. It avoids going too deep, avoids questioning too much, avoids anything that might destabilize what feels familiar. It lives within a structure that feels safe, predictable, known. And the other version, not fearless, not perfect, but willing. Willing to look without immediately correcting. Willing to observe without escaping. Willing to stay with what is, even when it becomes uncomfortable. Even when it contradicts everything it believed about itself. The difference between these two versions is not intelligence. It's not capacity. It's not even clarity. It's honesty. Because real self-inquiry begins at the exact point where you stop trying to become something and start seeing what is already there. And that movement has no guarantee. No promise of becoming better. No promise of arriving somewhere. No promise of keeping what you currently call yourself. Which is why it requires something deeper than motivation. It requires the willingness to stand alone, without psychological support, even if only for a moment. To look without the comfort of conclusions, to remain without immediately translating what you see into something familiar. And that is where something entirely different begins. Not a new identity, but the absence of one. Not a better version of you, but a different relationship with what you are. And this is the part that cannot be explained, only seen. Because the moment you truly see something about yourself without distortion, without resistance, without escape, that very seeing is already a transformation. Not in time, not gradually, but instantly. And the question is no longer philosophical. It becomes deeply personal. In your life, right now, where are you avoiding looking? Where do you already sense something is there, but keep moving away from it? That is your point of entry. That is where self-inquiry begins. If this resonated with you, share this with someone who might need to hear it, and tell me in the comments, what is one thing about yourself you've been avoiding seeing? I'll read every response. See you in the next video. If you felt something shift inside you while watching this, please subscribe and share this video with your friends and family. It could truly make a difference in someone's life. Now, don't break this moment. The next video on your screen is the perfect continuation, so click and keep going deeper right now. For those who want to explore this path more fully, the book The Awakening of the Observer is available in the pinned comments, with deeper insights and practical guidance for everyday life. And if this video touched you and you'd like to support the channel, you can donate through Buy Me a Coffee. The link is also in the pinned comments. Every bit of support helps us continue creating meaningful content.